Hi, I'm Blake Lively, and I'm going to be taking the BuzzFeed quiz, which iconic Blake Lively character?
It was one of those moments when Hollywood's perfectly polished image of power couples and red carpet grace began to fracture under the weight of courtroom filings, unsealed audios, and whispers of corporate warfare. The Blake Lively versus Corevanta scandal had started as a simple workplace dispute, or at least that's what the public was told. But as the weeks turned into months, it became clear that what was happening behind the scenes was much darker, much more calculated, and far more desperate than anyone could have imagined. When the leaked audio between Clara Yubb and Steve Sarowitz went public, the internet exploded, not because it was shocking in its language or tone, but because it completely contradicted the narrative Blake had built. For months, she'd maintained that she was the victim of a toxic, misogynistic environment orchestrated by Wayfair, Bellin, and a handful of executives within Corevanta who allegedly tried to silence her voice. But the recording didn't sound like a victim's proof. It sounded like a power struggle over creative control, a fight about branding, marketing, and image, not harassment or discrimination. Katie Joy, a commentary YouTuber known for dissecting celebrity court cases, was one of the first to break it down in detail. Her video began with a sharp tone. "Hey besties, welcome back. I think something big is about to drop." And she was right. Because inside the Reynolds-Lively household, things were reportedly far from calm. Sources close to the situation described the mood as panicked, as if both Blake and Ryan knew that the illusion they'd spent months carefully building was starting to crumble. That unsealed audio didn't just poke holes in her story, it detonated it. What was supposed to show a brave woman standing up to workplace abuse ended up revealing someone obsessed with control, someone allegedly trying to manipulate how her film and career were perceived publicly. The recording, which her team initially hyped as the smoking gun of her victimization, instead became a case study in how narratives can backfire when evidence doesn't align with claims. Instead of sympathy, Blake was met with skepticism, and that's when the real panic began. Because in Hollywood, the court of public opinion moves faster than any legal system. And when the tide turns, it's brutal. Almost immediately after the audio hit the press, Blake's legal team moved fast, filing what many legal experts called a Hail Mary motion, a request for sanctions under Rule 37(e) of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. Essentially, she accused the defendants, Wayfair, Bellin, Wallace PR, and others of spoliation, claiming they destroyed evidence that would have proven she was targeted by a secret digital smear campaign. The story she presented was cinematic. Corporate villains using Signal, encrypted voice memos, and self-deleting messages to mock her, strategize how to bury her in the media, and plot a coordinated retaliation campaign in late 2024. She painted herself as the victim of a shadowy cabal, PR agents, tech executives, and industry fixers conspiring to destroy her reputation. But the problem was simple and devastating. She had no proof.
None.
No screenshots, no metadata, no backup logs, no server traces, no emails, nothing. Just her word, and her assumption that if messages once existed and were now gone, then they must have contained evidence of wrongdoing. Her team argued that these missing Signal messages should be presumed incriminating and that the court should punish the defendants accordingly. It was a bold move, some even called it reckless. Because to win sanctions, especially under Rule 37(e), you have to prove that evidence actually existed, that the opposing party had a duty to preserve it, that they lost it through negligence or bad faith, and that it can't be recovered elsewhere. And yet, Blake's filing leaned heavily on speculation, on the idea that something must have existed, because she knows they used Signal during that period. The irony was painful. She was asking the court to assume guilt based on evidence that she herself admitted did not exist. Katie Joy's coverage captured the absurdity with biting humor. She's literally asking the judge to punish people for deleting messages that she can't even prove were ever real, she said. It's amazing that she knows things happen that she has zero proof of. And she wasn't exaggerating. According to the documents, Blake wanted Judge Lyman to tell the jury that they could presume all deleted messages would have supported her case, effectively giving her the power to fill in the blanks however she wanted. She even asked for what's called an adverse inference instruction, meaning jurors could assume that anything not produced was intentionally destroyed because it would have been damaging to the defense. It was a stunning request, and one that revealed just how cornered she felt. Because after months of litigation, dozens of depositions, and hundreds of subpoenas, her legal team had still failed to produce a single piece of hard evidence linking Corevanta or Wallace PR to any coordinated smear effort. Her claims of harassment and retaliation were unraveling under scrutiny. Even Judge Lyman had already ruled that using auto-delete messaging apps like Signal didn't, by itself, prove bad faith or intent to hide evidence. In his August 2025 order, he'd made it clear, you can't compel someone to produce what doesn't exist, and Blake had shown no proof that any specific messages ever did. That should have been the end of it. But instead, she repackaged the same argument, this time with more emotion and urgency, claiming that the defendant's use of Signal was proof of concealment, that their choice of an encrypted app alone suggested guilt. This wasn't just a legal argument anymore, it was a PR maneuver. Because when the courtroom narrative fails, the public one becomes even more crucial. Every motion, every leak, every headline seemed timed to shift perception. And at this point, it wasn't just about Wayfair or Corevanta, it was about Blake Lively's credibility as a public figure. The timing of her sanctions filing came suspiciously close to the release of the damaging audio, leading many to believe that the motion was less about legal strategy and more about controlling the story. As negative coverage mounted, from entertainment outlets to legal analysts, her team needed a new way to frame her as the victim. They deleted the evidence, she implied, and that's why I can't prove my case. It was, in essence, a rhetorical shield, a way to shift blame from her lack of proof to an alleged cover-up. But inside the legal community, the response was skeptical. Judges don't like emotional theatrics. They want evidence, and Blake had none. Her claim that the duty to preserve data began in November 2023 was weak, especially since the only letter she sent then was about return-to-work protections, not litigation. The actual preservation notice didn't go out until December 20th, 2024, meaning anything before that was fair game to delete. And yet, her motion treated every missing message like a smoking gun. She cited patterns of concealment and obstructive behavior, accusing Corevanta's PR partners of intentionally stalling discovery and violating court orders. But as the filings showed, they'd repeatedly told her team they couldn't produce what didn't exist, that Signal's auto-delete feature had erased older chats. The court had already acknowledged that fact and moved on. But Blake couldn't. Because without those missing messages, her case had no foundation. It wasn't about harassment anymore. It was about narrative survival. She needed to keep the illusion alive that something sinister had happened, that powerful men and corporations had schemed to silence her. That idea played perfect. For headlines, Blake Lively fights to expose secret smear campaign. It sounded noble. It sounded empowering. But in the cold, factual world of the courtroom, it sounded hollow. Behind the scenes, her relationship with Ryan Reynolds was reportedly strained under the pressure. The two had built an empire of charm, humor, and philanthropy, but legal scandals have a way of exposing cracks in even the strongest facades. Their PR team was overworked, constantly issuing quiet denials and pushing new talking points to deflect from the growing narrative that Blake's case was built on speculation. Insiders whispered that Ryan was furious about the handling of the situation, that he'd begged her to let the lawyers handle it quietly, but Blake's ego wouldn't allow silence. She needed to win, not just in court, but in the eyes of her fans. And so, every setback turned into another performance. When the Van Zon lawsuit fell apart, she blamed leaks. When Brian Friedman criticized her filings, she tried to have him disbarred. When her credibility collapsed in the media, she filed for sanctions. It was a cycle, one that felt increasingly desperate. Even her supporters were starting to ask questions. Social media, once her ally, began to fracture. Some fans still defended her fiercely, insisting she was standing up against a corrupt industry. Others, however, pointed out the contradictions, the shifting timelines, the vague accusations, the lack of evidence. Legal commentators noted how her filings contradicted each other. One week, she claimed to have thousands of pages of evidence ready to amend her complaint. The next, she claimed all the evidence was missing. Which was it? Did she have proof or not? To many, it looked like she was playing both sides, asserting evidence when convenient and crying spoliation when cornered. It was the kind of contradiction that judges notice. And Judge Lyman, known for his no-nonsense approach, certainly would. What was clear was that Blake Lively's war against Corevanta had become less about truth and more about optics. The unsealed audio destroyed the foundation of her victim narrative. Her sanctions motion, built on missing evidence, only deepened public doubt. Every move she made to regain control seemed to backfire harder. And through it all, the court, cold, impartial, and bound by rules, remained unmoved. Evidence still ruled above emotion. Proof still mattered more than perception. But in Hollywood, perception is everything. And that's where the story was heading next, into a battle not just of legal filings, but of reputation, influence, and survival. Because in the fight between Blake Lively and Corevanta, the courtroom wasn't the only arena. The real war was for public belief. And by the looks of it, Blake was losing both. It was supposed to be the performance of a lifetime, a Hollywood actress standing before a courtroom, ready to defend her honor and reputation. But what unfolded inside those glass-paneled walls wasn't a triumphant monologue. It was a breakdown, an unraveling of image and illusion as Blake Lively's case against Corevanta spiraled into something that even the tabloids couldn't have scripted. When Lively first accused Corevanta, a digital analytics firm, of orchestrating a smear campaign designed to destroy her public image, many believed her. She had charm, credibility, and a fan base large enough to rally behind any statement she made. Yet the deeper the court dug into her claims, the clearer it became that what she was calling evidence was little more than speculation dressed in designer words. The turning point came when the judge demanded actual proof, emails, contracts, recordings, or digital trails, anything that could substantiate her claims. What followed was a moment so silent it could have been cut straight from a courtroom drama. Blake's legal team froze, her expression faltered, and in that moment, she admitted what no one thought she'd say. The evidence she claimed to have never existed. That confession alone sent the courtroom into chaos, and the media outside turned it into a feeding frenzy. Reporters who had once celebrated her bravery now questioned her credibility, and the internet began dissecting every past statement she'd made. The hashtag no evidence trended within hours. Behind this public spectacle was a complex story of power, pride, and pressure. Because Blake wasn't just fighting Corevanta, she was fighting for control over her narrative. For months leading up to the hearing, she had accused Corevanta of planting stories online, stories painting her as manipulative and controlling, particularly toward industry insiders and close associates. But Corevanta's defense team, led by sharp legal tactician Brian Friedman, countered with a devastating strategy to prove that not only was Blake unable to present evidence, but that her team had actually manipulated the media to create sympathy and deflect from the ongoing legal inconsistencies. Court filings revealed how Lively's publicist had coordinated with gossip outlets to publish articles about her being targeted and defamed, often without verifying the sources. Once those connections were exposed, her legal foundation began to crumble. As if that weren't enough, her star power, something that usually worked in her favor, turned against her. Every reaction, every quote, every courtroom appearance was magnified under the public lens. When she appeared emotional, critics called it an act. When she remained silent, arguing that intent mattered, that Blake genuinely believed she had been defamed, even if she lacked hard evidence. But the judge wasn't convinced. Observers in the courtroom described her demeanor as shaken, her once composed presence replaced by visible anxiety. The moment she admitted to lacking evidence became the headline that no PR team could spin. The internet erupted. Blake Lively admits no proof of defamation became the leading story on entertainment sites, and legal analysts began questioning whether her case would survive another hearing. YouTube commentators dissected the transcripts line by line, with some calling it the fall of Hollywood's golden girl. The irony was sharp. The same woman who once played perfect, composed characters on screen now found herself at the center of a real-life meltdown. But what made this case so fascinating wasn't just the legal failure, it was the cultural moment it represented. For years, celebrities have leveraged social media and their fan bases to push narratives, often controlling public perception even before the facts come out. But this time, the system pushed back. The judge's insistence on tangible evidence over emotional testimony marked a shift, a reminder that fame cannot substitute for facts. Legal analysts like Stephanie Jones noted that this case could set a precedent for how courts handle celebrity-led defamation suits in the digital era. In a viral podcast clip, Jones stated, "This isn't just about Blake Lively versus Corevanta. This is about the collision of celebrity influence and judicial accountability. The court doesn't care about your followers, it cares about your facts." Meanwhile, Corevanta's team maintained their composure, confident in their strategy. They released a carefully worded statement emphasizing that their company had never participated in any defamatory campaigns and that the lawsuit had been an unfortunate misuse of the legal system. That statement, released just hours after Blake's courtroom admission, was picked up by nearly every major outlet. The damage was done. Blake's brand, which had long been built around elegance, control, and empowerment, suddenly looked unstable. Even her partnerships with luxury brands began facing quiet internal reviews as companies hesitated to associate with someone now branded as a manipulator of media truth. Inside her circle, tension reached a breaking point. Sources close to the case suggested that her legal advisors were divided. Some urged her to drop the case and issue a statement acknowledging her mistake, while others believed she could still salvage public sympathy by framing herself as a victim of poor legal counsel. But Blake herself reportedly refused to back down, insisting that Corevanta had destroyed her mental peace and that she would rather lose publicly than be silenced privately. Her defiance, while dramatic, only deepened the divide. By this point, the court had shifted its tone entirely. What began as a sympathetic ear to a potential victim of digital defamation turned into a procedural scrutiny of misuse of litigation. Corevanta's motion for sanctions included detailed breakdowns of her filings, highlighting inconsistencies, lack of timestamps, and statements that contradicted one another. The most damning revelation came when the court requested metadata for the alleged leaked screenshots, and none could be provided. That confirmed what Corevanta's team had argued all along, that these materials were either fabricated or misinterpreted. Outside the courthouse, the crowd grew larger with each hearing. Fans, critics, and content creators swarmed the steps, some chanting in support, others waving placards mocking her claims. The spectacle reached a fever pitch when a leaked courtroom sketch went viral. One showing Blake covering her face as her attorney whispered something in her ear during the sanctions argument. That image, shared across social media with captions like "caught in her own web," became a meme symbolizing the fall of credibility in the influencer age. Even as she faced backlash, Blake's PR team continued releasing statements emphasizing her commitment to truth and transparency. Yet the disconnect between her words and the court's findings widened with each passing week. What she saw as a battle for justice was increasingly being portrayed as a cautionary tale about hubris and control. And while Corevanta emerged legally stronger, the true damage was to the concept of celebrity credibility itself. One truth has emerged clearly: the power of fame, no matter how dazzling, fades under the scrutiny of facts. Blake Lively's war against Corevanta was no longer about winning in court, it was about surviving the court of public opinion. And that court, ruthless and unfiltered, was only just beginning its verdict. By the time the sanctions motion hit the public docket, the story had already escaped the courtroom and infiltrated every corner of pop culture. The words "Blake Lively admits no proof" were now etched into headlines, hashtags, and heated debate threads across the internet. What began as a legal dispute over defamation had mutated into a symbolic trial of celebrity accountability in the age of online manipulation. And Blake, once untouchable, polished, and admired, was now the face of a cautionary tale about what happens when public image collides with judicial truth. The days following her courtroom admission were a blur of damage control. Her team attempted to pivot the narrative, claiming that she had been emotionally manipulated by advisors and overly trusting of digital consultants who misrepresented the existence of evidence. But Corevanta's response was swift and surgical. Their lawyers released a detailed timeline proving that her accusations had been built on vague assumptions and gossip rather than factual data. The document was cold, clinical, and devastating, showing how her initial claims had no foundation in verifiable truth. It wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a dismantling. In the entertainment world, this was more than legal theater, it was reputational war. YouTube commentators exploded with reactions. Channels dedicated to celebrity analysis uploaded breakdowns titled Blake Lively, The Evidence Scandal Explained, and How a Hollywood Star Lost Her Case in One Sentence. Even creators who had previously admired her now treated the story as a lesson in legal overreach and public delusion. Some compared her actions to the Johnny Depp-Amber Heard courtroom saga, but others argued that this case was even more damaging because Blake's claims were self-inflicted. The phrase caught on fast, self-inflicted scandal, echoing across Twitter, TikTok, and even late-night talk shows. Inside Hollywood, the whispers grew louder. Executives began privately discussing her future marketability. Producers who had once considered her a safe, bankable name now hesitated to attach her to upcoming projects. Brands quietly reviewed endorsement contracts, worried about the optics of associating with someone accused of manufacturing a defamation narrative. The fallout was financial, emotional, and personal. Blake had always been known for her precision, her image, her interviews. Even her social media posts carried an almost curated perfection. But now, that same control looked artificial, and people began to wonder how much of her charm had always been performance. Corevanta, sensing public sympathy turning in their favor, decided to take the high road, or at least appeared to. They issued no inflammatory statements, made no appearances on talk shows, and avoided interviews. Instead, their CEO released a brief message. Truth doesn't need amplification, it just needs time. Those words became a viral quote, repeated endlessly by commentators who saw the irony of a data analytics firm being more composed than a Hollywood icon. Meanwhile, Ryan Reynolds, known for his charisma and wit, found himself trapped in an impossible position. As tabloids dissected every facial expression of his during red carpet events, speculation intensified about whether he was standing by his wife's legal crusade or quietly distancing himself. Some reports claimed he had advised her to settle before the sanctions were filed, warning that the case would draw unnecessary scrutiny. Others insisted he was furious at her legal team for letting the situation spiral this far. In one particularly viral clip, a journalist asked him about the ongoing case during a promotional event, and his brief, awkward pause became the internet's favorite meme. The caption, "When Deadpool realizes he can't talk his way out of court." But behind the humor, the reality was grim. Sources close to the couple suggested the stress was immense, not just from the case itself, but from the endless online noise. Every influencer, podcast, and gossip site had an opinion, and every new headline was another cut into an already fragile public image. Blake's once adoring fanbase was now divided, one half defending her as a woman unfairly targeted by the media machine she helped create, and the other half accusing her of manipulating that same machine for personal gain. As the case progressed, Corevanta's legal filings became even more aggressive. They demanded not only sanctions but also attorney fees and damages for reputational harm. Their argument was simple but brutal. Blake's lawsuit had wasted court resources, spread false information, and attempted to weaponize fame as a legal tactic. To make matters worse, leaked court memos showed that Lively's lawyers had internally debated whether their evidence would hold up under metadata scrutiny, meaning they were aware of its weakness long before trial. That revelation turned public opinion further against her, confirming what critics had suspected, that the case had been built on desperation, not documentation. The press dubbed the next hearing the Day of Reckoning. Crowds once again packed the courtroom. Inside, the energy was electric, reporters typing furiously, cameras flashing as the actress entered with dark glasses and a clenched jaw. Observers noted her silence, her refusal to make eye contact. Her legal team's forced composure. When Corevanta's attorney stood to argue the sanctions motion, the language was merciless. He accused Blake of abusing the judicial system to generate headlines, calling her filings a theater of deception designed to manipulate both media and court. Every word hit like a hammer, and for once, even her defenders online had no counterargument. Legal analysts began calling this case a modern morality play. In one viral commentary, Stephanie Jones compared it to the collapse of performative activism, the idea that some celebrities had started treating lawsuits like PR campaigns, using emotional storytelling to gain sympathy instead of relying on truth. The danger, she said in a clip that gained millions of views, is that once you build your case on emotion, you can't survive facts. Facts don't care about image. As the hearing adjourned, rumors spread that the judge was considering disciplinary measures beyond sanctions, including referring the case for review due to possible bad faith filings. That would be catastrophic for Blake's legal reputation, making her future lawsuits subject to scrutiny and skepticism. Her attorneys immediately went into containment mode, drafting motions to withdraw some of her earlier filings to show good faith. But it was too late. The narrative had crystallized. Blake Lively had filed a lawsuit without proof, doubled down on false claims, and then panicked when confronted with reality. Outside the court, journalists swarmed to get a statement. Instead, her publicist issued a carefully worded release. Ms. Lively remains committed to truth and transparency. While some of the evidence in question was misplaced, the emotional damage and professional sabotage she experienced are undeniable. But this attempt at damage control only made things worse. The phrase misplaced evidence became a punchline across social media. Within hours, Twitter users were mocking it with captions like, "Lost my homework, Blake Lively edition." The memes, the edits, the parodies, they came fast, brutal, and relentless. And yet, what made this entire ordeal so shocking wasn't just her downfall. It was what it revealed about the evolving relationship between fame, truth, and accountability. For years, celebrities had lived in a bubble of curated narratives where publicists and fan bases could spin even the worst situations into redemption arcs.
But the internet changed that.
Every statement could be fact-checked, every contradiction screenshot, every lie archived. Blake's courtroom panic wasn't just a personal crisis, it was a cultural reckoning. Corevanta, now vindicated, began rebuilding its reputation with quiet confidence. Their success in court was seen as a win for corporate accountability against celebrity intimidation. The company's share price reportedly saw an uptick after the ruling leaked, and business publications wrote glowing op-eds about how facts defeated fame. It was the perfect reversal. A tech company that had once been accused of manipulating narratives had now become the symbol of truth standing firm against Hollywood theatrics. Meanwhile, for Blake, the silence grew heavier. Her social media activity dropped. Endorsement deals paused. Public appearances were canceled. Insiders claimed she had entered a strategic retreat, focusing on family and reassessing her public role. But the damage lingered. Her legal credibility was fractured, her brand stained with the label of exaggeration. The entertainment world had moved on, not out of cruelty, but inevitability. In Hollywood, image is currency, and once it collapses, rebuilding it takes more than apologies.